There's a version of you that you've never fully met. It doesn't live in your memories or your conscious thoughts. It doesn't show up in your highlight reel on Instagram or in the story you tell people at dinner parties. But it's there. It has been there your entire life, watching, waiting. And here's the thing nobody tells you. It's running the show. Think about the last time you were on the verge of something great. A new job, a relationship, a goal you'd been working toward for months. And for some inexplicable reason, you pulled back. You got busy. You found a reason it wouldn't work. You sabotaged it before it could fail you. Or think about the last time you felt a sudden irrational rage at someone. Not just mild annoyance, real heat, real contempt. And that person wasn't doing anything to you. They just were. And something about the way they existed made your skin crawl. Jung called it the shadow. And once you understand it, you will never see yourself, or anyone else, the same way again. Carl Gustav Jung was born in 1875 in a small Swiss village, and he spent his life doing something most of us are too afraid to do, looking directly at the darkness inside people and refusing to look away. He was Sigmund Freud's most brilliant protege, his most dangerous student, the one who eventually had to go his own way because what Jung found in the depths of the human psyche was something Freud wasn't ready for. Jung didn't just believe that human beings had unconscious desires. He believed that every single one of us was carrying an entire hidden personality, a buried self, built from every thought we were taught to silence, every emotion we were told was wrong, every part of us that didn't fit. He called this the shadow. And he spent decades warning anyone who would listen, this hidden self doesn't disappear just because you pretend it isn't there. In fact, the more you ignore it, the more powerful it becomes. Most people, when they hear shadow self, imagine something sinister, a dark version of yourself filled with rage and cruelty. And sometimes, yes, that's part of it. But Jung's understanding of the shadow was far more nuanced and far more personal. Your shadow isn't just your rage, it's also your unlived potential, your unexpressed creativity, the dreams you buried because someone told you they were unrealistic, the confidence you suffocated because someone once made you feel small, the ambition you're too afraid to admit you have. The shadow is everything about you that the world taught you wasn't acceptable, and everything you taught yourself to hide. Here's how it works. From the moment you're born, you begin to learn which parts of yourself are welcome and which are not. You cry too much, someone tells you to stop. You get angry, you're punished. You want too much, you're called greedy. You're too loud, too sensitive. Too much, not enough. Piece by piece, you start editing yourself. You take those unwanted parts and you push them down, out of conscious awareness, into what Jung called the unconscious, into the shadow. By the time you're an adult, you've constructed a persona, a carefully curated version of yourself that you show the world. Confident, put together, calm, generous, whatever the world rewarded you for being. But the rest? The rest went underground. And the disturbing part is, it didn't die there. Think about a man raised in a household where emotions were weakness, where crying was shameful and vulnerability was dangerous. He learned early, don't feel too much, don't need too much, stay hard. So he did. He got very good at it. But what happened to the fear? What happened to the loneliness? What happened to the boy who just wanted to be held and told everything was going to be okay? It didn't go anywhere. It just went underground. When he gets close, really close, dangerously vulnerable, He starts fights. He picks at small things. He pulls away. He tells himself she was too needy, or it was too complicated, or he just wasn't ready. He doesn't know why he does it, but Jung would know. That suppressed vulnerability, the part of him that desperately craves closeness and is terrified of it at the same time, is driving him. Every time intimacy comes close, the shadow activates a defense system the conscious mind can barely see. This is what makes the shadow so powerful. It doesn't announce itself. It doesn't send a calendar invite. It just acts through impulse, through pattern, through the decisions you look back on later and think, why did I do that? Let's talk about the procrastinator. You know this person. Maybe you are this person. The one with the brilliant idea, the real talent, the dream they've been talking about for 3 years, and they cannot make themselves start. Everyone around them says, "You're so talented. Why don't you just do it?" And they don't have a good answer. They say it's time, or fear of failure, or they're waiting for the right moment. But Jung believed something even darker was happening beneath the surface. For many people, the real terror isn't failure, it's success. Because success would demand something from them that their shadow has spent years protecting them from. Being seen, being exposed, being truly known. What if they succeed and people realize they're not as brilliant as they seemed? What if success means responsibility? What if it means leaving behind people they love who aren't growing? What if it means becoming someone they were taught not to be? The shadow doesn't just protect you from pain. It also protects you from anything that threatens the carefully hidden story you've built about yourself. So it manufactures delay. It manufactures distraction. It manufactures the sudden, inexplicable exhaustion that hits the moment you sit down to do the work that matters. And meanwhile, you scroll through Instagram. You watch someone else's life. And you feel something you can't quite name. Not quite envy, not quite admiration, something uncomfortable and sharp. That feeling? Jung would say that's your shadow knocking. Here's what most people never realize about self-sabotage. It always makes perfect sense to the unconscious mind. The person who destroys every serious relationship they have isn't broken. On some deep, unconscious level, they believe that staying alone is safer than risking abandonment. So the shadow creates the very thing they're afraid of, not out of madness, but out of a brutal, backwards form of control. If I leave first, I can't be left. If I fail on my own terms, I can't be failed by someone else. If I never truly try, I can never truly be told I wasn't enough. Self-sabotage is a survival strategy, a misguided one that causes enormous suffering. But it has its own internal logic, a logic written in childhood, in trauma, in the accumulated weight of every time the world told you that what you wanted was dangerous to want. The shadow keeps old contracts alive, long after they've expired. And the cruelest part? The more sophisticated you are, the more self-aware, the more intelligent, the more elegant your shadow's excuses become. You don't just procrastinate. You build entire philosophical frameworks for why now isn't the right time. You don't just avoid intimacy. You curate very convincing arguments for why you're simply selective or independent. Your shadow gets smarter as you do. It uses your own intelligence against you. Now, here's where it gets really uncomfortable. Jung introduced a concept called projection, and once you understand it, you will never be able to look at your own reactions to other people the same way again. Projection is what happens when we take something we can't accept about ourselves and throw it onto someone else. The person who constantly criticizes others for being lazy, often terrified of the laziness they sense in themselves. The loudest moralist in the room, the one who can't stop talking about integrity, about authenticity, about how everyone else is fake. Watch them closely. The man who rages at his friend's arrogance, the arrogance that seems to be all he can talk about, that seems to live rent-free inside his head, is often carrying his own suppressed hunger for recognition that he was taught was shameful to show. What we cannot see in ourselves, we see everywhere in others. And this is why social media has become a shadow projection machine at industrial scale. Scroll through the comments on any post, and you will find an encyclopedia of human shadow material. People performing outrage at the very behaviors they engage in privately. People tearing down success they secretly envy. People policing the freedom they wish they had themselves. The things that trigger us most intensely in other people are almost always mirrors. Not always. Sometimes a person is genuinely doing something harmful, and your reaction is appropriate. But when the reaction feels disproportionate, when it lingers, when it follows you home, when you can't seem to stop thinking about it, Jung would say, look inward first. Ask yourself, not just why does this bother me, but what does this remind me of in myself? No arena brings out the shadow faster than love. We enter relationships believing we are fully rational adults, making conscious choices, and Jung would gently, devastatingly, suggest otherwise. He believed that we are unconsciously drawn to people who carry our shadow material, who embody the qualities we've suppressed in ourselves. The reserved man who falls for the wild, expressive woman. The people pleaser who somehow keeps ending up with the unavailable. The person who desperately wants stability, but is inexplicably attracted to chaos. This isn't coincidence. It's the unconscious doing its work. We project our unlived lives onto the people we love. We see in them what we cannot yet see in ourselves. And we call it chemistry. We call it love at first sight. And then, inevitably, the projection breaks. The wild woman starts to seem irresponsible. The unavailable man seems cold. The chaos starts to feel exhausting. And the same qualities we were magnetized to become the things we try to change, suppress, or resent in our partner. Because what we actually fell in love with wasn't fully them. It was a reflection of our own unlived potential. And when the projection fails, we feel cheated, betrayed. But Jung believed this moment, this breakdown, was actually an invitation to take back the projection, to ask, what is this person showing me about myself that I haven't been willing to face? The disturbing part is that most people never ask that question. They just leave and find another relationship that activates the same shadow, and wonder, somewhere in the back of their minds, why it keeps happening to them. As if the universe keeps making the same mistake. But it isn't the universe. Some people fail for obvious reasons. Lack of skill, lack of opportunity, bad timing. But some people fail for reasons they can barely articulate. And Jung's framework reveals a pattern that is almost unsettling in how consistent it is. There's a particular kind of person, highly capable, obviously talented, clearly intelligent, who seems to have a glass ceiling that only they can see. Every time they approach it, something goes wrong. A key relationship breaks down. A project falls apart. They say something in a meeting that derails months of work. They pick a fight right before a major opportunity. It looks like bad luck from the outside, but from the inside, Jung would say, something very specific is happening. The shadow is protecting an identity. If this person succeeds, truly, visibly succeeds, they have to become someone new. And somewhere in their unconscious, that new person feels dangerous because they were never shown what it looks like to be a successful person who is still loved, who is still safe, who is still them. They may have grown up watching success destroy a parent's marriage, or watching successful people be mocked in their community, or being told explicitly or implicitly that wanting too much made you a traitor to where you came from. Success to the shadow is a threat, and the shadow will burn the whole thing down before it lets you find out what happens on the other side. This is why Jung believed that the inner work, the confrontation with the shadow, was not optional for anyone who wanted to build a life that actually reflected who they were. You don't just hustle your way out of this. Discipline alone doesn't fix it. You can wake up at 5 a.m. and cold plunge and journal until your hand falls off, and the shadow will still be there, patient, waiting for the moment you get close enough to what you actually want. Jung died in 1961. He never saw social media. He never saw the attention economy. He never saw the peculiar madness of a world where billions of people perform curated versions of themselves for the validation of strangers. But he predicted it. Not in those words, but in the logic. He warned that the more a society demands a perfect, polished persona, the larger and more dangerous the collective shadow becomes. Because all that suppressed material doesn't disappear. It gathers, it ferments, and eventually it erupts in addiction, in violence, in polarization, in the particular kind of quiet desperation that looks like success from the outside and feels like emptiness from the inside. Look at the wellness industry, the constant, relentless self-optimization, the obsession with biohacking and productivity and becoming a better version of yourself. Ask yourself, what are we running from? Because the shadow doesn't just live in what we hate about ourselves. It lives in the exhausting performance of what we need others to believe about us. The Instagram highlight reel isn't just vanity. It's a monument to everything we've decided the world cannot see. And the more elaborate the monument, the larger the shadow waiting on the other side. So how do you find it? How do you locate something that, by definition, you've been hiding from yourself? Jung gave us several doors. The first door is your triggers. Pay attention to what makes you disproportionately angry, contemptuous, or anxious. Not every strong reaction is shadow material, but when a reaction feels bigger than the situation warrants, when it lingers past the moment, when it involves a particular person or type of person who seems to always set you off, that intensity is information. The second door is your judgments, specifically the ones you make most automatically and most harshly. The qualities you find most contemptible in others. Not a passive dislike, a deep, recurring disgust or contempt. Jung would gently suggest you map that disgust back to yourself and see what you find. The third door is your patterns. Not individual decisions, patterns. The relationships that always seem to end the same way. The opportunities that always seem to slip away at the same moment. The argument that keeps happening no matter who you're with. Patterns are the shadow's signature. They're the unconscious repeating its lesson until you're ready to learn it. The fourth door is your dreams. Jung believed the unconscious communicates most freely when the conscious mind is asleep. Recurring symbols, recurring figures, the shadow figure who appears again and again in your dreamscape, these aren't random. They're the unconscious trying to introduce you to the parts of yourself you've been avoiding.
Jung called the process of integrating the shadow individuation, and he was under no illusion that it was comfortable. He didn't offer a simple 5-step program. He didn't promise you'd find your shadow self over a weekend retreat. He believed it was the work of a lifetime. Slow, non-linear, sometimes painful, but the only process through which a person could become genuinely whole. But here's what he would likely say if he were alive today, speaking in plain terms. First, stop running from your darkness. Not to indulge it, not to excuse it, but to know it. Because the things you refuse to acknowledge about yourself don't disappear. They gain power in the dark. The moment you turn and look at them, something shifts. Not always immediately, but the acknowledgement itself begins the integration. Second, take back your projections. The next time someone bothers you to an unreasonable degree, sit with the discomfort long enough to ask, what would it mean if what I see in them was actually in me? You don't have to believe it immediately. Just hold the question open. Third, stop performing wholeness you haven't earned. The wellness aesthetic, the toxic positivity, the carefully curated emotional mastery, they don't build a healthy psyche. They build a prettier shadow. Real integration is messy and disruptive and will cost you some of the stories you've been telling about yourself. Fourth, find a container for the inner work. Therapy, if you can access it. Genuine journaling, not gratitude lists, but real, honest, unflattering accounting of your patterns and reactions. Meaningful relationships where honesty is possible. Creative work. Anything that gives the unconscious a legitimate channel. And fifth, take the shadow's energy, not just its darkness. This is what Jung believed most deeply. Your shadow isn't only wound, it's also unlived life. The anger has energy in it. The suppressed ambition has drive in it. The buried creativity has fire in it. Integration isn't about extinguishing those forces. It's about learning to direct them consciously, rather than being directed by them unconsciously. Here is the uncomfortable truth that this entire documentary has been building toward. You are not just the version of yourself you've chosen to show the world. You are also the rage you've been swallowing, the ambition you've been apologizing for, the grief you haven't allowed yourself to feel, the desire you've labeled shameful, the greatness you've been too afraid to pursue. You are the person you've been pretending you're not. And every pattern in your life that confuses you, every relationship that keeps ending the same way, every goal that keeps slipping away, every moment of inexplicable self-destruction is your shadow doing the only thing it knows how to do, refusing to be ignored. Jung didn't believe in self-improvement in the way we've come to understand it, as adding better parts to yourself while quietly discarding the uncomfortable ones. He believed in integration, in becoming whole, in the radical, terrifying, ultimately liberating act of meeting yourself fully. Not the curated self, not the optimized self, not the self that's been performing adequacy and hiding the rest. The actual self. All of it. And what waits on the other side of that meeting, on the other side of that confrontation, is something the productivity apps and morning routines and self-help frameworks were never quite able to deliver. A life that is actually yours. Not a life built to impress people who won't even exist in your memory at the end. Not a life shaped by the fear of what you might find if you looked too closely. Not a life quietly driven by patterns you never chose and motives you never examined. But a life that came from the
full range of who you are, shadow and light together. That, Jung believed, was what it meant to truly live. So here's what I want you to do when this ends. Don't immediately scroll to something else. Don't let the algorithm take you somewhere louder and easier. Sit with it for a moment. Ask yourself, not in a performative, journaling prompt way, but honestly, what part of you have you been most committed to hiding? What have you never let anyone see? What would it mean for your life if that part of you was actually real? Not shameful, not broken, not something to be fixed or suppressed or curated away, but real. A real part of who you are, waiting not to destroy you, but to complete you. Jung spent his life looking into the darkest corners of human psychology, and what he found there wasn't something to be afraid of. It was something to be claimed. The shadow isn't your enemy. It's the part of you that has been waiting patiently your whole life for you to finally come looking.